Which blood pressure number is more important when determining if you have high blood pressure? Is it the first number, the systolic number, or is it the second number, the diastolic number? In years past, and we're talking decades now here, the diastolic number was considered more important. It was the second number. It was more informative of whether you were at risk of heart disease and heart attacks and strokes and things like that. A normal blood pressure, according to today's standards, is the systolic number needs to be between 90 and 119, and the diastolic is between 60 and 79. So if you have blood pressure that's 119 over 79, that's considered normal. If your blood pressure suddenly changes to 120 over 80, that's considered pre-hypertensive. That's right, that one little number can make a difference between being in different categories. Now you're considered pre-hypertensive up to the systolic number being 139 and the diastolic number being 89. After that, if you're 140 over 90, then you are considered stage 1 hypertensive. Now we're gonna fast forward a little bit here so that I don't waste your time, but there is a stage 2 hypertensive, there's an isolated systolic hypertensive, there's lots of different things, but what happens if your systolic number is within the normal range, but your diastolic number is out of range, it's high? Or vice versa, what happens if the systolic number is high, let's say it's 140, 141, but your diastolic is considered normal, let's say 79. Which person would you rather be? Which one is worse? The answer is there really is not a lot of consensus on this. Both numbers are considered important now, but let me give you some insight that may help you understand what these numbers mean. The first number, the systolic number, is the number when your heart contracts and wants to push blood through your arteries. And the best analogy is, for example, a fire hose. A fire hose is nice and flat, but then when you turn on the water really high, it pushes through and the fire hose expands. Now, a fire hose is very stiff and non-compliant. That's so that when the water comes out of the fire hose, it can shoot really far. So a fire hose has a high blood pressure when the water is really on. That's how I want you to think of the systolic number. When your heart beats, instead of a water fountain, or not a water fountain, a fire hydrant, but when your heart beats and pushes blood instead of water through your arteries, which are essentially tubes, there's a lot of pressure in there. So the first number is always going to be higher. Depending on the compliance and flexibility of the artery, there can either be lower pressure or higher pressure. This number, the systolic number, is very often influenced very radically with stress, anxiety, caffeine, cigarettes, illegal drugs. There's a lot of ways that the first number can fluctuate tremendously. The diastolic number is when the heart is relaxed, and of course there's still some blood in the bloodstream in your arteries. So thus, there still is some pressure, just not a lot. And in this particular case, just like a fire hose, when you turn down the water at the fire hydrant, then there's less pressure in the fire hose. Maybe the fire hose is a little squishy and not as much water is coming out of the end. So while there's still pressure in your artery, it's not as high. Now, if this number is high, this means that even when your heart is not beating, your blood pressure is higher than it should be. And this is the reason why in years past they believed that the diastolic number, if you had to pick one, was more important to look at. Because while the systolic can be influenced greatly, the diastolic can't be influenced greatly. Usually if the diastolic number is high, you're talking about a diseased artery and a diseased person. And it is harder to change your diastolic numbers. So while the current thinking now is both numbers are equally important, they do signify different things. If you would like to learn how to lower your blood pressure naturally rather than just taking medications and hoping for the best, there are many natural things you can do that will lower your systolic number and your diastolic number. So right here, there's a box. Click this box and watch the complete guide to lowering blood pressure. This is all for free. I give you a bunch of different ideas that you can do to try to lower your own blood pressure naturally.